Perfect. Got a couple people still trickling in. Thank you, everybody, for your patience. All right. All right. So again, welcome to WIN's Winter Speaker Series. This meeting is going to be recorded by WIN and MCAT. WIN has a grant with our partners, Missoula Community Access Television, MCAT. It's going to be recorded by MCAT as part of a media assistance grant donated to Watershed Education Network. So this recording is going to be aired on MCAT channel 189 and downloaded to video on demand at a later date. So if you don't want your name or anything on this recording, you can change your name to guest and keep your video off. And then Steffi's also going to record this so we can reshare it later on.
Recording in progress.
Yeah, there we go. Okay. So welcome again. Thank you for joining as we learn from Casey Ryan tonight. I'm Asa Wise. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the stream team coordinator for Watershed Education Network. Before we get started, I wanted to run through a few housekeeping things and to give you a little rundown of all things Watershed Education Network, and then I will hand it off to Casey Ryan. First and foremost, I wanted to start this by acknowledging that Watershed Education Network recognizes that we were on sacred grounds for the Bitterroot Salish, Upper Pend Oreille, and Kootenai Native American people. Today and every day, we honor the path that they have always shown us in caring for the environment for generations to come. And beyond acknowledging the land we are on, I encourage all of you to learn more and to donate if you can to the Nuxum Salish Language School, which is reaching out to bring people together around language in an empowering and family-friendly way, as well as the Ronan Bread Basket, a 501c3 organization and food pantry providing reliable source of food for Ronan, Pablo, Shiloh, and Moise areas. And as you can see, Steffi is adding those to the chat box, a couple of those links if you're interested in checking those organizations out. And there's tons of other awesome organizations in that area that I encourage you to check out. So a little more housekeeping. Steffi, like I said, is going to be monitoring that chat box, as well as continuing to add related articles and links to find more information about what you might learn tonight. I think Casey Ryan also has a couple of resources for you as well once he gets started. You can put any of the questions that you have in the chat box, and Steffi will monitor that, and we will go through questions and answers at the end of Casey's talk. If you don't know how to add that to the chat box, like I said before, down below is that more button. You're able to add to the chat. You can also send a direct message to Steffi or to myself or to Casey. If you have any questions to start off, any technical difficulties, go ahead and do that now. We can practice if you'd like. Okay. I'm going to hop into our presentation. I've got a couple slides just to talk to you about Watershed Education Network. Just share my screen here. See. Steffi, can you give me a thumbs up if I've got the PowerPoint up? Sweet. Okay, so thanks everybody. This is our 2022 speaker series, our #1 presentation with Casey Ryan. So Watershed Education Network is, most of you are familiar with it, I'm sure, but I think we have a few new folks. So I just wanted to familiarize everyone with WIN and how you can get involved. WIN is a 501c3 nonprofit organized since 1996. We've been around for 26 years. We have led students and community members like you wading in their watersheds. This winter speaker series is just one more way we can hope to keep the conversations flowing about the importance of water through the winter. If you'd like to learn more, you can always visit our website. I think Steffi's going to add that to the chat box right now. You can learn more about our staff, our board, our partners, and other programs at montanawatershed.org. Our mission is to foster knowledge, understanding, and appreciation of watershed health through citizen science, youth and school engagement, and outreach to our communities to ensure healthy watersheds for our next generations. I'm just going to go through a couple of our programs that have kind of been our priority programs since COVID. Our first one is the Citizen Science Stream Team, which I lead with Steffi's help. It's a volunteer-based team getting together during the summer and fall to collect important stream data on Rattlesnake Creek in partnership with Trout Unlimited and a lot of other agencies, in particular for the Rattlesnake Dam removal that was taken out summer of 2020. School and youth programs, grades K through 12. We're in the classroom and outside, focusing on river ecology, fish habitat, groundwater, and storm water activity for students. Backcountry Stream Corps, that's probably my favorite right now. That is a new one we launched this last summer. We take 6 crew members, high school age crew members, and we ride bikes up into the Rattlesnake Rec area along with a few WIN staff and volunteers, and we are exploring and collecting meaningful fish habitat data up in the upper watershed of Rattlesnake Creek. And we're sharing that information with Trout Unlimited and Fish, Wildlife, and Parks and the forest and anybody else that's interested in that fun information. We also have a pilot program. It's our family science program. We are creating science kits for families to observe, investigate, and record findings on their local rivers, creeks, and ponds. One of the fun ones that we're doing with that is, oops, one second. There we go. Scavenger hunts, for example. The RISE Challenge Big Sky is resilience, innovation, sustainability for the environment. We partner up with Brightways Learning, and it's a funding opportunity for students to develop ideas and solutions to make their communities more resilient to environmental disasters. And as you know, we have our winter speaker series. So this is new. This is our first one. So we have tonight. We also have February 28th. March 28th and April 25th. They're all the fourth Monday of the month. And it is an opportunity for us to learn more about our watersheds with engaging presentations like tonight from local professionals like Casey Ryan. So thanks for joining us. We were hoping to have this in person, but with the amount of cases with COVID right now, we are all on Zoom. So stay tuned for the next couple ones. That might change, but for so far right now, we'll be on Zoom. And then we have another program that we've just launched. It is called Welcome to Your Watershed. It's a community outreach strategy to inform, engage, and welcome everyone to our local watershed concerns, and sponsors are welcomed. If you have any questions or if you want any more information, we have all of this information on our website, montanawatershed.org. And just a reminder, next Monday presentation on February 28th, same time, Zoom or in person. We're going to have Torrey Ritter. Most of you probably know Torrey Ritter. I've heard him speak before. He's a non-game wildlife biologist with Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, and he's going to be talking about beavers in our watershed. And then we'll have March 28th and April 25th as well. So add it to your calendar. You can always use the same. If you haven't, you can use the same Google form that you use to sign up for this one, to sign up for those. All right. Now I am going to hand it off to Casey Ryan. He's a CSKT hydrologist with the Resource Management Natural Resources Department, Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes. And he's going to do an overview of the CSKT's water measurement program and hear about how they are collecting and using water measurement data to benefit both fisheries and farmers. All right, thanks, Casey.
All right, thank you, Asa. Really appreciate that introduction. I actually sad to take the mic. I'd love to hear you talk more about that, especially that backcountry team. That sounds really neat. Well, Chestilu Pesia, Casey Ryan Quest. Chis Skelhu til Otko, Chines NPLC, who Yepn Chines Lemti Real Quaske. Good evening, everyone. My name is Casey Ryan. I am Bitterroot Salish. I belong to the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes, and I'm really excited and really happy to have the opportunity to be here with you this evening. Thank you so much to Watershed Education Network for hosting the Winter Speaker Series and thank you for inviting me to be here with you to kick off the series. It's actually quite an honor. So I see a couple friends here in the Zoom, but for those of you who I haven't met, just to introduce myself, I grew up there in the Missoula Valley in the lower Rattlesnake, actually. So Rattlesnake Creek was very special to me growing up. I was often sent out to play, after dinner and got to hang out until the streetlights came on. And quite a bit of that time was exploring the meanders of Rattlesnake Creek and the little islands down there. And then when I grew up, it became the Rattlesnake Wilderness area as I got a little bit older. I got 2 degrees from the University of Montana. I started my career with the Fish and Wildlife Service, had a wonderful time through their SCEP program. And then in 2015, I started with our tribe's Safety of Dams and Roads program. I worked my way through there into the water measurement program and accepted a position here in 2016. Now my role has expanded just a little bit. I now help with compact implementation. So I'm within the Division of Engineering and Water Resources, and that is housed within our Natural Resources Department. As a Bitter Salish tribal member, gathering together and telling stories in the winter is definitely one of my favorite cultural traditions. So again, I'm really excited to be here with you guys and share a little information about our tribe's water measurement program. I did have one question before we start. Deb, when you invited me to do this, you said that there was going to be dinner. So are you hiding the food?
What are we going to do? We're going to have to get it to go and run it up to you, right?
Okay, I'll be here.
We'll do that the next time you're in town. The Watershed team will meet you for dinner.
Okay, that sounds great. If not, we'll be here for what you said, 3 or 4 hours. So there's plenty of time to get a pizza delivered over here. So, all right, with that, I'll split up my PowerPoint here. And we'll all say a silent prayer for my rural internet connection up here.
Our fingers and toes are crossed, right?
All right. There we are. So, in addition to water measurement, our tribes recently settled their long negotiated water rights settlement. And so Deb asked me to provide a little bit of background on that. The water rights settlement is an incredibly complex topic. So, it can't really be tackled in 30 minutes. It involves water law. It involves surface water hydrology, groundwater hydrology, water supply forecasting and modeling, irrigation project rehabilitation, environmental restoration, cultural preservation, economic development, just to name a couple topics. So with that in mind, with my presentation, I would like to provide a cultural background of the settlement, a brief overview of some of the core themes within the settlement, and then focus on my role in compact implementation, which is really in water resources management. All right. Just to orient us in space and cultural geographic context, here's a map developed by the Salish and Kootenai Culture Committee of tribal Aboriginal territories. You may recognize the red lines on this map, and those indicate the current political boundaries of what is now Montana, as well as the surrounding states. In orange, you can see the current political boundary of what is the Flathead Indian Reservation to the north. And this map also shows the Southern Bitterroot Indian Reservation to the south, and that's described in Article 11 of the 1855 Hellgate Treaty. This dark and light blue area that you see here, that represents the Aboriginal territories of the Salish and Kootenai peoples. And so at the time of the treaty, our Aboriginal territories occupied over 20 million acres, and those spread from, Washington down through what's now Coeur d'Alene Lake into Idaho, Canada, down south to what is now Yellowstone National Park, and then even north up to the Sweetgrass Hills. And another thing you'll see if you look close on this map is some of our tribes' names for these places. And a lot of those names describe the lands, the waters, or the animals that lived in those places. To this day, many of these Aboriginal territories remain important areas for traditional use, and they also remain important places of cultural practice for the Salish, the Kootenai, and the Kasanka peoples. I also wanted to show this timeline of Salish history in Montana. This is also from the Salish Kootenai Culture Committee. And I think this is neat because if we look at the history of human settlement here in Montana, archaeological evidence goes all the way back to the Anzac Clovis burial site just north of Livingston. And that shows that humans have been here in this area for at least 13,000 years. But what's very interesting is that Salish oral history contains stories of a foreign land full of ice and of snow, with animals that were much larger and often more dangerous than the ones that we have today. And a lot of these stories in our creation stories sound almost identical to what geologists tell us that the last ice age must have looked like. In fact, there are too many similarities for it to be mere coincidence. And so I point this out because when we talk about tribal history, we often talk about this little sliver in time here on the right-hand side of your screen. In fact, if you were to crack open a book about Montana history, I can almost promise you that it probably starts in April of 1805, right? When Lewis and Clark came through and they reached Montana and they met the Salish people. And that's too bad because there's a lot of really good stuff that's happened during this more broad timeline. So I really like this because it's a great visual to help emphasize the length of time that people have been living here in Western Montana. If you were to think of the oldest pyramids in Egypt, those are about 5,000 years ago on your timeline. So that may give some context as well. And during this entire time of habitation, tribal peoples have been caring for the landscape and ensuring that there would be sufficient resources for future generations. So who are we today? Today, our confederacy includes 3 tribes: the Salish, the Kasanka, and the Kootenai peoples. We're governed by a tribal council of 10 elected tribal council women and tribal council men from districts around the reservation, and they in turn elect a chairwoman or a chairman. Today, our tribes consist of about 8,000 enrolled members, and about 5,000 of those members live on the reservation. And the CSKT is the largest employer on the reservation. And they employ about 1,400 people. A little bit of tribal background. Who here has been to the reservation? You can raise your hand there. I can see a lot of you. I think pretty much most of us, right? So just a short time ago, it looked much, much different. This is a land status map here. All right, I see a show of hands. Excellent. This is a land status map here on the left-hand side of the screen, and that shows the status or the land ownership, if you will. So keep an eye on that map as we go through. In 1855, that Hellgate Treaty, in the Hellgate Treaty, the CSKT ceded about 20 million acres of their Aboriginal territories, and they did that in exchange for certain guarantees within the treaty. And those include the exclusive use and benefit of the tribal homeland on the Flathead Indian Reservation. And it also includes the Aboriginal rights to hunt, fish, gather, trap throughout their Aboriginal territories at all usual and accustomed places. And that clause in Article 3 is significant because although this language doesn't explicitly mention water rights, courts have repeatedly held that the language within Stevens' treaties gives rise to more than a simple right to access fisheries at all usual and accustomed places, because fishing rights implicitly include a right for habitat to support fish, right? And so recall that for the tribes, those usual and accustomed places represent all that blue area in the map we just saw, which is most of the state of Montana, specifically the western half. This is a land status map in the 1930s, just a short 80 years later. As you can see, it's dramatically different. And that's largely driven by a couple things. Primarily in 1904, Congress passed the Allotment Act, and that set the course for the loss of over 60% of the reservation land base. Tribal members were given either 80 or 160 acres of land, and the rest was deemed surplus, and they were opened up to homesteading. And so very quickly, the tribes became a minority on that homeland that they reserved for themselves, and that had profound and lasting impacts on tribal languages, tribal cultures, and tribal communities. The other thing that happened in 1904 was that Congress authorized the construction of the Flathead Indian Irrigation Project, and that would be constructed over the next 56 years, finally being completed in the 1960s. Today, that project is 128,000 acres, and that affects every major watershed on the reservation. Here's a land status map from today. This one's 2021. As you can see, there was a lot of land restored back to tribal management, and that was the result of decades-long effort to purchase back their reserved lands. As of 2022, the tribes are now their majority landowner on their own reservation, owning and managing somewhere around 60% of the land base of the reservation. And to the tribes, caring for the landscape remains a tradition, a responsibility, and a priority. As just a couple examples, in 1934, the CSKT were the first tribal government to adopt a federally approved constitution under the Indian Reorganization Act. The tribes set precedent as the first tribal government to establish primitive areas and tribal wilderness area within their jurisdiction. In 2013, the CSKT were one of the first tribes to author a climate change strategic plan, and we are currently in the process of updating that plan based on new science and policy. Our tribe's wildlife management program has successfully reintroduced threatened and endangered species back onto tribal lands, and they've also established special wildlife management areas. Since 2002, the Nakusum Salish Language School has operated in our league, and that's helped to perpetuate language and culture for tribal members of all ages. Our tribes also have a successful suite of technology companies, all housed under S&K Technologies umbrella, and the reservation is home to Salish Kootenai College, which offers numerous four-year degrees as well as several master's degrees, and those serve various members of the communities. I'm actually a part-time student over at Salish College, Salish Kootenai College, with all my free time. So I list these to show that the compact is frankly a lot of work, but this is a tribal organization that does not shy away from big projects. And I think nowhere is that idea of vision really more eloquently contained than within our tribal council's vision statement, which I wanted to share with you here because I think it's so well written. And that says that the traditional values that served our people in the past are embedded in the many ways that we serve and invest in our people and communities, in the way that we have regained and restored our homelands and natural resources, in the way that we have built a self-sufficient society and economy, in the way we govern our reservation and represent ourselves to the rest of the world, and in the ways that we continue to preserve our right to determine our own destiny. So let's talk briefly about the CSKT Water Rights Settlement, and that's also known as the Water Rights Compact, or often just the Compact. It's a very broad topic, and the full story of the Compact is really more of a dissertation than a half-hour presentation. So this is just to give a 30,000-foot view here to give some context, and then we'll dive into water measurement. So why do we need a settlement? Well, in 1908, the Supreme Court upheld that when the United States sets land aside for an Indian reservation or any reservation of land, a quantity of water is reserved, which is necessary to fulfill the purposes of that reservation. Also, the Montana General Stream Adjudication Act, when that was passed, it required the quantification of all of the pre-1973 claims to water rights in Montana. And so that included those Aboriginal as well as those federally reserved water rights that were claimed by Indian tribes as well as by the federal government. So the quantification, the settlement of those tribal water rights, those can be quantified in one of two ways. They can either be quantified through litigation, or they can be quantified through settlement. So the CSKT Water Rights Settlement, or the Compact, if you will, that represents the negotiated settlement in between the CSKT, the state of Montana, and the United States of America. The compact quantifies tribal water rights both on and off of the reservation, and it provides for the unitary administration of water rights on the reservation moving forward. It sets the framework for that up. Briefly, the chronology of that settlement. So the negotiation between the tribes, the Compact Commission, and that federal team, those have been going on since 1979 when the Compact Commission was set up. But those talks really got accelerated in 2008, In 2013, the compact was introduced into the Montana legislature. It didn't make it out of committee that year, but the folks did a lot of hard work at the time, and it was reintroduced in 2015 and passed by the Montana legislature as Senate Bill 262. In December of 2020, it was passed by U.S. Congress as the Montana Water Rights Protection Act. And also in December 2020, it was passed by our tribal council as CSKT Ordinance 111. And so being signed by all three parties, it was then finally executed by the Secretary of the Interior on September 17th, 2021. And that date really triggers a lot of timelines like the registration of existing uses of water, the new in-stream flows, and also the Unitary Management Ordinance. So some of the core themes in the settlement include the quantification of the tribal water right, so to quantify that water right, all aspects of it, the administration of the tribal water right, the administration of existing and future state-based as well as tribal water rights. And that's the Unitary Management Ordinance. So that sets up a Flathead Water Management Board to administer water rights on the reservation. That is composed of 2 members appointed by the governor of Montana, 2 members appointed by tribal council. Those 4 members select a 5th member, and there's also a 6th ex officio non-voting member that's appointed by the federal team. So they had their first meeting last Thursday. So that is, it's getting up and running and marching forward. The settlement also includes waivers. So the tribes waive their ability to sue for damages claims and damage awards, and represents a broad-based waiving of future damages. It includes the restoration of the National Bison Range to the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes once more. It also has significant components for the Flathead Indian Irrigation Project, including rehabilitation and betterment of the project, as well as the ability for reclamation and restoration of natural resource damages that were caused by the project. And it also sets up a number of exciting tribal initiatives, including capacity building, cultural preservation, education, the economic opportunities, and more. So let's talk briefly about that tribal water right. That tribal water right consists of multiple uses, and it's the biggest water right in the compact. And so that often includes non-consumptive uses of water. Those would typically be associated in this case with cultural and ecological values. Those include in-stream flows. So there are 102 locations where there are natural in-stream flows. Many of those are above points of irrigation diversion, so those typically do not require administrative action. There are 42 irrigation project-related in-stream flow locations, and also 49 other in-stream flows that remain to be perfected. The tribal water right also includes reservoir levels, so minimum reservoir levels for fisheries, for wildlife and recreation purposes. There are protective levels for high mountain lakes. It includes the natural pool for Flathead Lake on and off the reservation. And it also includes Aboriginal water rights in the Kootenai, the Swan, and the lower Clark Fork basins. So I'll start by giving an overview of our tribe's water resources program, because our measurement program is the purveyor of most of the water quantity data here on the reservation. The CSKT established their Natural Resources Department in 1982. And in 1982, one of the very first programs in that department was what is now the Water Resources Program. In fact, our Chief of Field Operations, George McLeod, who still works for the program to this day, likes to remind me that he signed up for a one-year study in 1982, and 40 years later, he's still measuring water here on the reservation and has trained generations of hydrographers. So this program has been measuring water since 1982, and that includes snowpack measurement throughout our Aboriginal territories. We are the largest cooperator with the Montana NRCS. We also have a pretty robust surface water measurement network, and that includes 90 real-time gauges that measure reservoir levels, canals, as well as streams. We also do special measurement projects, and those include things like water quality measurements to help out our water quality program. We also have an active groundwater measurement program, and that's been in place since the 1980s. Currently, that consists of 28 active monitoring wells. That data goes to the MBMG, and we have historic data on many, many more. And so we use that data to quantify water resources on the reservation, to help defend tribal water rights. We provide technical assistance to tribes as well as partner agencies, and also to ensure in-stream flow compliance so that we can manage our natural resources in a good way. In terms of the history of water measurement on the reservation, we have an incredible data set. So water measurement on the reservation began in 1906, when the United States Geological Survey began to characterize the water availability on the reservation with the knowledge that they were going to build this larger federal irrigation project. After construction of the project, a lot of that measurement responsibility really shifted to the irrigation project so that they could help manage water deliveries, as well as to try to get a handle on water supply forecasting and to try to manage their irrigation reservoirs. Today, we are the largest water measurement agency on the reservation, and we continue to measure all those locations to this day to protect tribal natural resources, to protect the tribal water right, and to try to provide data to the irrigation project so that they can continue to make historic irrigation deliveries while also making sure that they're able to leave water in the stream for fish. In terms of big picture objectives for that water measurement program getting set up, the tribes, natural resources are often form a part of tribal cultural identity. I find this to be true in listening to a lot of the stories that our elders tell. They emphasize that natural resources and cultural resources are really one and the same. The tribes have held that competent water measurement really helps to support tribal sovereignty as well as to defend tribal water rights. And our tribes have also long held that best available science is the preferred approach to resolve our treaty-based water rights. And so if you zoom in on a lot of these place names, a lot of them really talk about water and the creatures that live in water. So for example, I'm coming at you live from Ronan, Montana, which traditionally is known as Botsk'etk in Salish, and that means spring water or water coming up out of the ground. We're just south of Squelust Keps, which is the Beaver's Dam, and we're near Skipmetko, which is the place of the falling waters, which is where they built what is now Salish Kasanka Klispe Dam. And for those of you in Missoula, you're probably closer to I, or also known as Eichston, and that's the place of the small bull trout. So that's the confluence of the Rattlesnake Creek and the Clark Fork River, which is, where I grew up and right next to the WIN offices there. So you can list that as your address. There's a lot of technical drivers too for water measurement on the reservation. This is a really complex setting when it comes to water. So I mentioned the irrigation project that touches every major drainage on the reservation. And in many cases along the Mission Mountain front, it captures a lot of those small streams, in many cases in their entirety. And they no longer flow out onto the Mission Valley floor. They're captured in the irrigation project. So there are multiple trans-basin diversions. There are over 128,000 irrigated acres just on the project. There are 17 major irrigation reservoirs and over 1,000 miles of canal. As you can imagine, managing water and delivering water to all those irrigated acres requires pretty extensive measurement requirements. There's also legal regulatory settings. So we have in-stream flows that have been in the place since the 1980s due to some court cases. And those court cases set up minimum in-stream fisheries flows at 28 points across the reservation, where minimum stream flow targets have to be met. We also recognize that surface water and groundwater are a unitary resource. In fact, in many places on the reservation, they are quite highly connected. And so we want to manage water as a unitary resource and measure it, quantify it, and understand it. We also want to understand and manage for variability in water supply and climate over time, and having a robust data set helps us to do that. So I know that a lot of you are involved in Watershed Education Network. Some of you have gotten out there on the stream teams. You've been involved in water measurement or water data collection. So I thought it would be kind of cool to show a little bit more about our gauging network. So this picture on the left here, we use primarily stilling wells. That's what that one is at Mission Sea Canal. And that's just an enclosed shaft, and that has an intake line. So that's connected to the main stream or canal that lets the water levels in the shaft and the canal equalize. That stilling well then has a float, which goes up or down depending upon water level change. And that's recorded by a little wheel in this recorder house. So that recorder house has recording equipment. It also has telemetry equipment, as you can see, to send that up to a satellite network. And we also use bubblers at several locations, such as locations where we have freeze up, or we want 12 months worth of data. Some of these stilling wells can freeze up during the winter. So those bubblers on the right, those work by expelling gas through a line installed at the bottom of the stream or canal. And then that piece of computer equipment measures the pressure required to deliver that little bubble of gas, and it converts that into a depth of water. And then it records that water level and sends it out via satellite. Once that data is recorded by the field data collection platform, it then goes through NOAA's GOES satellite network to receive the data transmission. That data is then passed into DCS Toolkit, then through the Aquarius Data Acquisition System software. It's then sent to Aquarius Time Series software. We run it through a rating curve into a volumetric discharge, and then from there, we use that data internally, and we also publish it onto our public-facing website, and that uses the Aquarius web portal software as its framework. So I often think about people like George, who's been measuring water since 1982, and this all used to be done in paper and pencil. And so this represents a dramatic transformation in technology. So very cool for those members of our program who have been here for 30 plus years. A lot of them, in fact, those older members of our, or more experienced members of our program, are the ones really helping with the technology handoff here in the background. So here's a snapshot of our measurement network. This is our public-facing website. Maybe I'll paste a link in the chat here. Currently, our measurement network includes 90 real-time gauges, and those are in every watershed of the reservation, every major watershed. Data at each one of those sites is located in 15-minute resolution, and each of those locations transmits data and publishes to our website once per hour. And so that website is available to the public at https://csktwaterdata.org. Make sure you put the S in HTTPS. I'll put a link in the chat so it's a little easier to reach. So this is really cool, right? I mean, once upon a time, this data would have all been kind of internally in our database, but one of the things that we've done since 2015 is we put it live on the internet in real time for anyone to grab. And so that includes the Irrigation project. They now have access to this real-time data to help them manage water deliveries to all of those irrigated acres. And they have that data in real time. So they can even pull that up on their cell phone while they're sitting there in the morning drinking their coffee. They can check real-time stream flows all across the reservation. Pretty cool stuff. Our data is also used by a lot of other partner agencies internally. Those include like our fisheries program. So they'll use it to check river flows, and they'll use it for studies, for fisheries program purposes. I also have recreationalists who call me and let me know that they use our website for a number of different things. I know I personally use our website to check on river flows every time before I go check out my favorite fishing hole down on the, I'm not going to tell you guys. So another cool thing that we can do with this website is, so we have these interim in-stream flow compliance checks that we have to do, right? To make sure that we have enough water in the stream. So the streams aren't dewatered during irrigation season. Those lawsuits came about, and the in-stream flows actually came about because in the 80s, a lot of the reservation water bodies were dewatered. In fact, we have a photo of the Jocko River at the mouth completely dewatered from the 1980s. So part of the reason the in-stream flows got set up is to make sure that that didn't happen again and to try to prevent loss of tribal fisheries. And so how do we check them? Well, once upon a time, you used to have to kind of go line by line through the database, look at the stream flow values, know in your head what the in-stream flow was for each location. But one of the cool things that we've done with this website is I actually configured it to allow us to do instantaneous in-stream flow compliance checks. So those white dots are locations where there's no minimum required in-stream flow. Maybe it's a canal, for example. And then if there is an in-stream flow value, I color-coded it red, yellow, green, like a stoplight. So the green ones are meeting in-stream flow values, yellows are close, and those red ones are below minimum in-stream flow values. So I took this screenshot a couple of weeks ago when I was putting together this presentation. You can see a lot of them are below in-stream flow. Those are actually, in this case, just due to low base flows because it had been a little bit dry to that point. So during irrigation season, however, anytime that we see those, we can check on them. And this is a really valuable tool, both for us as well as for the irrigation project, to make sure that they're able to, meet their requirements in real time as well. In addition to having minimum required in-stream flows, the irrigation project also has maximum allowable return flows. So some of the reservation irrigation is done via flood irrigation, for example, and the water that's not used there gets oftentimes dumped back into tribal waterways. And so, as you can imagine, this is hot water. It has elevated sediment. It has elevated nutrients, not the kind of stuff you'd want to drink on a hot summer day. And so there are maximum allowable flow amounts that can go back into tribal waterways. So one of the neat things we can do here is I set up the same stoplight on our website, and this monitors for those wasteway return flows so that the irrigation project can make sure that they're keeping within their legally required boundaries there as well. That's really cool because it moves us from monitoring compliance after the fact to being able to monitor that stuff and manage that stuff in real time. This is a hyper simplified schematic of what our measurement network looks like and how it was set up. So this central figure is a canal diversion head gate, so maybe a major diversion off of a stream. There's actually couple of these right near the Wen headquarters. So the next time you're walking by the Clark Fork River, see if you can spot a couple of these. So this is what they look like here. And in terms of irrigation project management, this represents a decision point. So water can be left in the stream, and the irrigation project manager is required to leave a certain amount in the stream for fisheries. And so excess water then is potentially available for diversion, and in often cases diverted in order to provide irrigation deliveries. And so the objective here for the irrigation project manager is to succeed in this high-speed balancing act in between reservoirs, rivers, canals, trying to meet irrigation needs while simultaneously protecting natural resources. It's incredibly complicated. And so part of the reason that we set up this network is to try to provide enough data for them that they can do a good job at this complex task. So the Flathead Indian Irrigation Project consists of 14 major irrigation facilities, and those range in size from 1,000 acres at Turtle Lake to 27,000 acre feet at Pablo Reservoir. And these reservoirs impound water for irrigation deliveries, but they also provide recreational opportunities. They provide a place for tribal members to go to practice traditional cultural activities and cultural uses, and they support fish and wildlife habitat. So currently, the irrigation project relies on manual measurement to check the volumes in these reservoirs. And as you can see by the map, they're pretty spread out. Getting to some of these reservoirs can be 2-hour plus drive times round trip, sometimes on super gnarly roads. Anyone who's ever been hiking in the Mission Mountains knows what the road network can be like up here. And so imagine, driving back and forth like that for 8+ hours a day. This is definitely an area where having remote sensing capability is going to be really important and valuable for the irrigation project. And so that's really our crew. This is a picture of us installing one of these water level sensors at McDonald Dam at the top. We have now completed 9 of 14 of these installations, and we anticipate that having access to this real-time data is going to really allow for integrated water resources management on the reservation. So this is a snapshot of provisional data from 3 of those sites. This is from Nine Pipe, Kicking Horse, and McDonald reservoirs for the 2021 irrigation season. This is super cool for the irrigation project for remote sites, for sites where a lot of them will have really dynamic fill and spill components. And then some of the irrigation reservoirs, like Kicking Horse, are actually used as intermediary reservoirs where water is being transferred from one location to another. So one of the projects that our measurement program is doing is we've installed 9 of these 14 reservoirs. We've got 5 to go, and those are going to happen next fall. I also mentioned that we have 28 interim in-stream flows on reservation streams. And so those interim in-stream flows don't change with time. They're a static value all year long. So here's 3 examples. Big Knife Creek, it's always 2 CFS. Jocko River below Cape Canal, it's always 44 CFS. And Agency Creek is always 8 CFS. This is a hydrograph of the historical daily mean discharge in the Jocko River below the Jocko Cape Canal. And so that orange line indicates the in-stream flow required of 44 CFS in the Jocko River. So one process introduced by the compact is this process and this concept of adaptive water management. What does that mean? Well, that means that these in-stream flows are actually now going to vary by month. So there will be monthly targets for these values. Not only do these vary by month, but they also vary depending upon whether we're in a normal year, a wet year, or a dry year. And so those are shown by the green, the purple, and the orange lines on the hydrograph to the right. So a significant difference in how water is going to be managed, but it's an iterative process. These in-stream flows are going to be phased in by service area, and those don't kick in until 5 years after compact effective date of 2021. And while they do represent increases over those historical in-stream flows, during compact negotiations, all 3 parties were very careful to ensure that they could be met through operational improvements, as well as through rehabilitation and betterment projects to buff up the irrigation project, and then also through the rehabilitation of the Flathead pumping plant. So the goal here is to ensure that irrigators receive the same amount of water that they've historically received, while also satisfying those in-stream flows of the CSKT. So during the negotiations, these irrigation canals are oftentimes very inefficient. The Jocko Valley, for example, that's all glacial outwash, right? And so a lot of that water just seeps into the soil. So one of the projects that we're working on right now is to convert a lot of that into a pipe system so that water can be conserved, to try to help the irrigation project meet these demands. So the key here is data. I'll also mention that there's an agency called the Compact Implementation Technical Team, which is a joint tribal state entity with irrigator representation. And that Compact Implementation Technical Team is actually able to adjust these allocations. So depending upon water supply, depending upon seasonal climatic variability, and irrigation project considerations, that compact implementation technical team can adjust those targets. Say, for example, if climate change were to result in runoffs moving earlier in the hydrograph, the CITT could actually make those adjustments to the in-stream flow requirements. So how are we going to meet these requirements? Data, right? Lots and lots of high quality data. And so one of the things that our program is doing is by assisting here, by providing the stream flow and the canal flow data that's going to be necessary in order to evaluate the river diversion allowances. And we also maintain several gauges at natural flow locations to help make that determination about wet, normal, and dry conditions. So some cool projects that we're looking forward to for the water measurement program. Our program is busy continuing measurements that support tribal services, such as groundwater monitoring efforts, our water quality measurements, water resource quantification studies, etc. Over the next year, we're going to be installing the 5 remaining reservoir level sensors, and that's going to have a total build out of all 14 irrigation reservoirs on the reservation and as part of the project. Our water data website will continue to enhance that. I'm always seeking feedback on that, so if you have an idea of how it could be a more useful product, feel free to give me a call. Our program will continue to quantify and help with your apportionment of that reallocated water that is saved following completion of the rehabilitation and betterment projects. And we'll support adaptive management by providing the compact implementation technical team with that data necessary that they need to execute the adaptive management that we saw in the previous slide in order to make any sort of adjustments that they might need to in terms of climatic and hydrologic conditions. We'll also continue to work on quantification of those 49 other in-stream flows that I mentioned that are outlined in Appendix 12 of the compact, and any other measurement requirements that are outlined in either the CSKT Montana Compact or that may be called for by the Water Management Board. And, you know, as I mentioned, the compact is really more than my little program. It's a joint effort from dozens and dozens of people. And so I thought I'd share some highlights from accomplishments that have been occurring outside of my program. So some additional recent and short-term compact implementation work. The tribes have been working on water rights registration along with our partners at the Montana DNRC. And that includes the 180-day registration for all state law-based uses and the 5-year registration for all existing uses of the tribal water right. We will be looking forward to supporting the Water Management Board that was set up. One of the joint commitments that the tribes in the state made was, upon request, that Water Management Board or the Office of the Engineer can request technical assistance from the tribes or the state. And so we look forward to providing them with that technical assistance and advice. We've also been engaged in strategic planning for rehabilitation and betterment efforts so that we can address entire service areas holistically rather than just moving project to project. We have a whole irrigation rehabilitation and betterment team that has now formed, and they are working on projects to help conserve water resources, to help enhance fish and wildlife habitat, particularly for cultural species and threatened and endangered species. And they are working very hard on rehabilitating irrigation project structures, canals, pumping facilities, providing dam safety improvements, and other irrigation project upgrades. And so the goal there is to try to allow the project to make consistent water deliveries to farmers and also simultaneously conserve water for fish and meet the new in-stream flows. We also have a large mitigation, reclamation, and restoration component with the compact. And so that is being led by our restoration program. And they're working to add into each of these compact projects aspects of restorations of streams and wetlands, installing new fish passage barriers and irrigation ditches where they didn't exist before, and just generally restoring natural resource damages that were caused by the irrigation project. And then lastly, environmental compliance is anyone who's a NEPA nerd out there in the audience or is familiar with MEPA is probably sitting forward in their chair right now. And that's because they're aware that just this little list that I've ticked off represents a significant amount of work, right? So we do have in-house NEPA capability, and it's definitely keeping us very busy, which is a good thing. So there's a brief overview of the compact, specifically as it relates to water resources, water measurement, and how we're using some of that data to support execution of the compact. The compact is a very complex piece of legislation, but I'm very fortunate that we have an amazing team of people here who at CSKT who are working on compact implementation, and that includes multiple tribal departments. It includes the full-time work of dozens of people who directly or even indirectly contribute to the success of the implementation. And we also have excellent partnerships with our non-tribal neighbors, and those include the state of Montana, the BIA, Fish Wildlife Service, Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, too many nonprofits to mention, individually, and local irrigators. And I'm sure I'm leaving some people off, that's just to name it. So as a hydrologist and a technical person, I think this is a very exciting opportunity because the settlement is very data-driven. And our tribes have a water measurement program with over 100 years of collective experience in water measurement and hydrology. So I'm really looking forward to being a part of the team that I'm on and continuing to help develop our program to meet the water needs of today, as well as the water data needs of tomorrow. So there's significant opportunity moving forward to address irrigation project efficiencies, to restore natural resource damages, to provide economic opportunities, and also to perpetuate our language and our culture. So with that, I really appreciate the opportunity to be a part of your day and to share all this information with you. So thank you again to Deb and to Watershed Education Network and Lemlemsh Pesia. Thank you to all of you.
Awesome. Thank you, Casey. I think we had one question from Morgan Case. Maybe we missed it. Is there a method of relaying real-time data, satellite or cell?
Yeah, that's a great question. The method is via satellite. So we transmit via satellite telemetry, and then we use NOAA's GOES satellite network to handle that satellite transmission. That then comes down into our database and onto our website. So maybe if I have a quick second in between questions, I will throw a link in there to our website so that folks can get on there and check it out. There we are.
Cool. And Robbie has a question. Robbie is one of our volunteers for Stream Team. Has the reservation been experiencing the drought that much of the rest of Montana has been? Does it make it harder to allocate water for different uses?
Yeah, that's a great question. We've definitely been challenged in terms of water supply availability the last couple of years, particularly at lower elevations. The last couple of years have been really weird in that we've seen maybe the high elevation snowpack in a couple of those years remained healthy, but our lower elevation snowtell sites really showed a rapid early season decline in lower season or in lower elevation snowpack. And in fact, anyone who's driven through the Jocko Valley recently, it really, a lot of that snow has disappeared. And so I worry that we're just sort of on this continuing trend where we do see sort of a rapid melt of that lower elevation snowpack earlier in the season. So yeah, I looked at the drought monitor and we're doing definitely better than a lot of the rest of the state of Montana, and that upper elevation snowtell site is doing pretty good, but yeah, definitely are not immune to the trends that we've been seeing here in Western Montana. I will point out, if you do bookmark that website, and you get really hooked on it. And you're like, Deb, I know Deb checks out our website every morning when she's having her coffee to look at stream flows. So we're working on moving our entire database to the cloud, actually, for various reasons, that seems to be where everybody's going these days. So that website may or may not change, the link to that. So just prepare yourself, Deb. If it doesn't come up here in a week or two, we'll get you a new link. Just move into the cloud like everybody else.
Oh, good. Thank you. I'll try that tomorrow morning.
All right.
Awesome.
Well, Casey, I've got a question for you.
Please.
I'm curious if, just when I think about irrigation and in-stream flows, in most communities and most watersheds, that's a fairly contentious issue. And just kind of, I'd love to hear you describe how the relationship is being built with your, people on the ground who are working with irrigators, and how the communication's going, and how this is being received as the way of the world on the Flathead Indian Reservation.
Yeah, that's a great question. In terms of meeting those in-stream flows, the irrigation project recognizes that it's in need, right? That's sort of the rules of the game that you have to play by. And so we have been doing a lot of work to try to provide them with really sound data so that they can make informed water management decisions and really be efficient with their irrigation water deliveries, which benefits not only the irrigators through being able to make consistent irrigation water deliveries, as well as to make sure that they're able to manage their stored water later in the season. And of course, that also benefits fish, right? Making sure that we have those in-stream flow values being met. So that's here on the reservation. The tribes have also participated in a number of initiatives to increase on-farm efficiency. And so that includes an expansion of the Bureau of Reclamation's AgriMet network here on the reservation. We worked with them, so that provides real-time crop water use data for local irrigators. And a lot of them do get daily updates on that in terms of what their crops need so that they can schedule their water deliveries accordingly. So I think that's been really valuable data for them. We're going to continue to try to provide local irrigators with information on how to make better, or just, give them the data for on-farm efficiency and let them kind of make the call and manage their water deliveries that way. I think that's been really well received locally. In terms of those in-stream flows off the reservation, the tribes, many of my colleagues have been working very closely with our partners from the DNRC, Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, local nonprofits, watershed groups, as well as local irrigators to participate in a lot of public outreach, to, really listen to people, work with people, just be fully transparent and try to consider it a partnership moving forward and see, maybe there are solutions like, just consider it a partnership moving forward and see how we can help.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Hey, Radley, how you doing?
I'm well. How are you, Casey?
Doing great, thank you.
Good, great talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I am wondering, and you kind of touched upon this in finishing your last point. All these innovative approaches to dealing with water on the reservation. I'm wondering where you guys are getting your knowledge. Do you look to federal agencies? Are you looking to researchers at colleges and universities? Are you looking to, are you experimenting now that you have all this great data and playing with some of the water bodies you have? What are some of the most helpful ways for you to be innovative and implement all these ideas? Where do you go for these great ideas?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Radley. So is that specifically in context of water management? Is it irrigation project rehabilitation? All the above?
Yeah, I guess just generally, it seems like there's a lot. I mean, I didn't know if there was a particular agency that's been really helpful or, just enough momentum. You have a lot more flexibility than, a juggernaut federal agency to actually look at current research and say, let's do this. I'm just wondering what's helping make, I mean, you're all in all, the tribal programs sort of young, even though you have this rich history, and it's so cutting edge, in my opinion. I think it's most states would be envious to have their geographical territory covered so well and conservation mechanisms going on. So I guess I'm just wondering what knowledge is most helpful in developing a program like that.
Yeah, thanks, Bradley. That's a great question. So I know just internally within the context of my program, I benefit significantly from having really knowledgeable colleagues here at the CSKT. Of course, my predecessor, Seth Makepeace, is a name that everybody knows. And anytime I have a question, I call him Encyclopedia Makepeace because he's been in the game since '93 here with the tribes and is just an incredibly knowledgeable and kind person. In terms of a lot of the other things that you mentioned, we also benefit from a lot of really good partnerships. And so that includes a number of state-based agencies. We have colleagues with the DNRC that we work with very collaboratively and enjoy good partnerships with. We also work with Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, Bureau of Indian Affairs, Fish Wildlife Service. There are a number of people that we work with on even a daily basis on a lot of these efforts that, they're great people to have on your team. And one of the fun things about entering into this new era of compact implementation is the ability to work on a lot of these significant infrastructure projects. And in doing so, that involves the A&E engineering community. It involves the restoration engineering community. And so having the opportunity to interact with just wonderful professionals from all over the state of Montana, as well as sometimes outside of the state of Montana, it's frankly a lot of fun to really have such a large professional Rolodex of people that you get to work with on a daily basis. Really keeps you on your toes and forces us to be innovative so that we can stay in the driver's seat.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We've got a few more minutes, and since we've only got a couple of people in the room, if you guys have any questions, feel free to just turn your mute off and go for it. Maybe.
Just as a point of discussion, Casey, it seems like the technology just kept evolving from your Water Resources Division. Can you kind of describe how you grew from that 1982 stream gauge that was probably just out there to take a look at, and how you grew the technology that you're using now?
Yeah,
amazing.
How exciting. You know, I took a cartography class at the University of Montana from a gentleman who talks about his wife often getting angry with him because they never ate a single meal at their kitchen table because it was full of his drafting stuff for all the maps that he was making as a young cartographer. And he taught me GIS. And so I think it's been sort of a similar transformation for some of the folks in our program like George and Steve, who started in the 80s when it used to be an army of Suburbans driving around checking on staff gauges and making weekly or even daily measurements, to moving into strip charts and Stevens recorders, going through pygmy meters and all of the different methods that have been used to measure water. Moving forward to today, where now they're using acoustic Doppler profilers. We've got river surveyors, and they're really using the latest and greatest equipment. And they've used everything since those early pieces of equipment in the 80s until now. So how cool for them to have that as part of their career and to move from working records via paper and pencil and strip charts. They I mean, they used to literally do this by paper and pencil and have eraser shavings all over the place. And now they're using incredibly sophisticated pieces of technology that, frankly, if you look under the dashboard about how they do their rating curves and stuff like that, it looks like a spaceship. It really does. It's really cool. So they're using incredibly powerful pieces of software. They've really come a long way. So I'm very excited for them and the changes that they've been able to see in their career. And it makes me curious about the changes that we are going to see in our careers. Who knows what the future is going to look like 30 years from now. It's kind of exciting.
Casey, on that note, I got a question. Do you foresee, or maybe it's already happening, but any water quality measurements that'll be real time and in the area?
Yeah, that's a great question, David. So that's definitely a possibility. Our sites are enabled for it. And so for example, we used to provide real-time temperature data on a number of the streams, and the fisheries program found that to be incredibly valuable for things like monitoring return flows, for just monitoring general stream flow temperatures. And a lot of those sensors, things break after time, and historically, we really haven't been able to afford to replace them. But yeah, those are aspects that we could bring back. And so that can be things such as temperature, but it could also include salinity. It include a number of different water quality metrics. So yeah, those are things that we could definitely look into depending upon the needs of the program. We do have a separate water quality program, and so they come up with their annual sampling plans and stuff like that. We work out an annual MOU with them for measurements to help them out with their studies. But I know they said they have some cool plans this year, and they're going to do some new stuff. We haven't really talked about what that looks like, but I'm excited because they have a great water quality plan, or great water quality program up there. Wrote their own water quality standards, and a lot of opportunity to work with them on new and exciting projects to come. So thank you for your question there. That'll give me something to think about before our next meeting.
Right on. I'd love to see it reported on that map. That's a really great resource. Thanks for that.
Yeah, thanks for the idea.
All right. Well, lots of thank yous. Yeah, I just want to echo everyone's thank you. Casey, this was great. I think we've all been reading a lot about this, but it's great to hear from you and to see all those maps and stuff. Yeah, if anybody has any questions later on, Casey, is it okay if we put your email in the chat?
Yeah, I'm going to put that in there right now.
Awesome. Cool. And if anybody has any questions on any Watershed Education Network stuff, you can find our website, montanawatershed.org. Also, we're on Instagram. It's just Montana or watershed.education.network. We post a lot of our upcoming events on there, as well as the speaker series. Yeah, so thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you, Casey, again. And we hope to see everybody at the next one. So that's February 28th with Torrey Ritter talking about beavers in our watershed. I see a question from Morgan. Any chance this recording will be able? Yes, we are going to share this. We'll probably have it on our website. If you send me or Steffi an email, we could probably send this to you as well if you'd like to have it. It'll probably take us a couple days to get it on our website and everything. But yeah, go ahead and shoot Steffi an email and she can get that sent over to anybody. Also, MCAT, like I mentioned before, they're going to have this recorded and on their platforms and stuff. And so we have everyone's emails as well. And so we can follow up with everybody on that too. Cool. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Visit our website for more information. Reach out to Casey, and we'll see you next time. Hope you guys all have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Wen, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Endless. Thank you, Casey. We'll reach out